Then in the US, we have 14 locations and considered number 2. If we look at our footprints, we'll go west to east. Locations in Seattle and Madera, as you might suspect, are primarily wine producers. As you move into the south and up through the Midwest, Houston to Burlington, Wisconsin, it's beer, it's food and beverage, a little spirits. As you move into the East Coast, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, North Carolina, similar product mix, heavy in beer and food, a little spirits and wine. I know this is a busy chart, but I always kind of like showing people the history of Ardagh Glass Packaging or Ardagh Group. So if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, our origins are really in the Ball Brothers Glass Manufacturing Company in 1884. They spent some time headquartered in Muncie, Indiana. If you're familiar, that's where Ball State is, so the names make sense. They're related. For those of you that have been glass adjacent or been in glass or familiar with it, some of these names sound familiar, like Ball. In 1995, Ball Foster made an acquisition, so some may remember American National Can or Foster Forbes. In 2000, a French company, Saint-Gobain, acquired Ball Foster. And then in 2010, they changed their name to Veralia because there wasn't enough change already. Ardagh came in 2012 into the US and acquired Anchor Glass. And then in 2014 acquired the US assets of Veralia. At that time, we were too big and we had to divest. So we actually kicked out a few plants and Anchor became again. And then in 2021, we acquired Anheuser-Busch's Houston glass manufacturing facility. I am curious though, has anyone been to a glass container manufacturing facility? Oh, a decent amount. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, thank you. If we look at the industry itself, and this is domestic and imported food and beverage packaging, what's the material that it's in? And you likely would expect, most of it's in plastic, 21% in metal, and then we've got a little 7% sliver there. And then of that 7% sliver, where is it going? And it's primarily beer, just under 50%, food at 23%, beverage and wine at 10%, liquor 6%, ready-to-drink liquor at 4%. And I should say this is in units, this is like eaches or gross, if you're familiar with the dumb unit of measure that we use in the glass industry. It's not tonnage, it's gross. So a very drastic change into sustainability at this point. And our aim is really to minimize our environmental impacts while staying economically sustainable and socially responsible. So our strategy, our sustainability strategy has 3 pillars. It's emissions, it's ecology, and it's our people and our communities. And don't read it all, I'll simplify it. On the emission side, it's really carbon, it's CO2, and it's NOx. Ecology, it's water and waste. And on social, it's really about our people and our communities. So it's making sure that we're good employees and that our employees and our connection to the community is very strong. And so at the very end, while I'm going to focus on decarbonization, I'll touch on one of our social programs where we've invested a lot into STEM education in and around the communities where we operate. And our sustainability filter is pretty important. We believe sustainability only has a sustainable impact if it is economically viable, both long and short term. So a little bit of context about why Ardagh has kind of bought into sustainability. And we'll start with the environment and all the stuff we've seen or heard for a long time. But atmospheric carbon is 415 parts per million versus 250 parts per million, 350,000 years ago. We know that climate change is approaching very rapidly and that it's likely going to be irreversible without significant action. And that 97% of actively publishing climate activists or scientists agree that humans are causing climate change. But there's a business aspect here as well. 70% of customers are willing to pay an additional 5% for a green product. 76% of consumers boycott products or services based on their values. And we're seeing a lower cost of capital for companies with higher ESG or environmental, social, and governance scores. And I touched on this earlier, it's very ambitious. We've got a long road ahead of us. Our customers, our competition, our peers are setting a very high bar. when you compare us to metal or aluminum, specifically aluminum, they're roughly 50% lower carbon footprint than glass, and even more so with PET at 66%. Big, busy chart, but we've likely all seen something like this, or this chart specifically. But I think it gives some context about how much carbon is really being emitted. And this is 2016, but almost 50 billion tons of carbon or carbon equivalent emitted annually. Where is it coming from? Industry like chemicals and cement, 5%, waste at 3%, agriculture, 18%. And as you might suspect, the vast majority is coming from energy, whether that's in energy in the industry, energy in transport, or energy in business or buildings, excuse me. Glass is clearly represented here. As I said, we're energy intensive, and our products are fairly heavy. So it takes, there's a significant transportation or logistics aspect of this as well. And I forgot to say this. Interrupt me, please. If you have a question, just shout it out or raise your hand. So related to an earlier point, this was a study done by Carbon Trust. And what it did was it was looking at the carbon emitted of a 330 ml container, whether that was one-way glass, refillable glass, one-way PET, refillable PET, or aluminum can. And so you can see the difference pretty clearly. And so let's be fair, if I focus on the US, we love our convenience. We like to grab and go, we like to throw away, we like to put all of our recycling in one container. And so while refillable and returnables do have a component of decarbonization, we are working to decarbonize one-way glass. And so we believe that there is a pathway, a roadmap, to decarbonize one-way glass so that we are competitive with PET and aluminum. So I'm going to transition now a little bit into, what's our current status? What are our targets? What are the levers and projects that we have to achieve decarbonization? I didn't say it earlier, but Ardagh is an Irish company. We really lean into it with this graphic. I will start in the bottom right with our 2030 targets, and that is a NOx intensity reduction of 23%, going clockwise. It's a water intensity reduction of 26%. Goal of zero waste to landfill, and then the primary focus of today is really around greenhouse gases. So we have approved science-based targets, which is scope 1 and 2, 42% reduction, and a scope 3, 12.3% reduction. And I'll touch on what those are in a second. And then we have a goal of being 100% renewable electricity by 2030 as well. Okay. What is scope 1, 2, and 3? If you look at the middle of this slide, we'll start with scope 1. And where it says reporting company, think Ardagh glass packaging. Scope 1 are direct emissions. It's what's coming out of our furnace. It's the natural gas combustion emitting CO2. And then the chemical conversion of raw materials like limestone, soda ash, and so on. As you heat them up, they naturally emit CO2. We call them process emissions. So both combustion of natural gas and process emissions, that's the scope 1. If you think of scope 2, it's really the indirect electricity. It's the carbon emitted when we burn coal and natural gas to generate electricity. And then scope 3 is kind of everything else. It's everything upstream and downstream. So think mining of raw materials, logistics to get it to our plant. Downstream, it's shipment of our products to customers or to folks like you who are decorating it and then shipping it to customers. So if you look at how our CO2 is allocated, because we're very energy intensive, we are the converter. We're chemically converting raw materials into glass. The majority of our emissions are in scope 1. It's through our furnaces. 20% of our emissions are related to electricity, scope 2. And then 30% of our emissions are that scope 3, upstream or downstream. Now, what does that mean for our customers? When we ship to our customers, all of our scope emissions then feed into their scope 3 because we're their supplier. So this is an example of one of our customers. So if you look at it, 85% of their emissions are from their suppliers, from their supply chain. So they come and they say, Ardagh, what the hell are you doing to decarbonize? Or the better customers are saying, hey, what can we do to help you decarbonize? So lots of interest, especially in the glass industry, around how we become more sustainable. So how do we break this out? How do we tackle this? So we break this into about 6 different levers or categories. We talk about cullet, or recycled glass. We talk about new technologies, energy efficiency projects, renewable electricity, product design, and low carbon transport. So I'll try and do a little waterfall or graph for you to walk you through how we're envisioning this. So assume that's our baseline. That 2020 baseline is about 1.5 million tons of carbon. And we have a 42% reduction by 2030. Now those goals were passed in 2020, and then we made that acquisition of the Anheuser-Busch glass plant in Houston in 2021. So we have business growth. So we don't get to resubmit, that just gets tacked on. So now we have a larger number to decarbonize. Now, as we go through here, these are more directional, they're not exact, but cullet's gonna help bring it down. New technologies will bring it down. Energy efficiency a little bit. The lion's share is really gonna be in renewable electricity. Product design almost does nothing, and I'll talk about that a bit in a few more slides. And similarly with low carbon transport. And as of today, we still have a gap. And we're okay with that. There will be some new technologies that come around. There'll be hopefully some softening of the market where things become a little bit cheaper and well known. But we do have a gap to accomplishing our goals. So let's look at cullet. I'm gonna try not to spend too much time. I could talk for hours about recycling in the US because it's very poor. But glass, hopefully as we know, is infinitely recyclable without loss of quality. Scope 1 and 2, for every 10% of cullet that we add to our batch mixture, we can reduce our energy by about 2 or 3%, which reduces our emissions. Scope 3, as we increase cullet, that reduces our need for virgin raw materials. We're clearly reducing waste to landfills by creating a circular economy for glass. But the problem is we have a very fragmented approach across the US. Recycling is not consistent anywhere. And so this was a slide developed by our trade association, the glass packaging industry. And it's a little busy, but on the right you'll see we're roughly 31% average rate of glass recycling nationwide. When you look at states like Oregon, California, New York, they have, say, bottle bills or deposit return systems. So it's in their culture, it's in their legislature, they're very good. But as you move into the Midwest and the South, it really, really falls off. 8% in Illinois, 12% in Georgia. A long list of reasons. I'll pick on geography. Long distances between big cities and population density. It doesn't make sense to ship glass 1,000 miles to use it. It's just not cost effective. Also with geography, we got a lot of land, which means it's cheap to dig a hole and throw all our shit in it. I'll just be honest with you. We're lazy, it's easy to do it. And so beyond that, I'll pick on the lazy part. We're just conditioned for convenience. And I'll also pick on some of our customers who have lobbied for decades against bottle bills, against deposit return systems, because that would add 5 more cents to buying that beer or that spirits brand. So we have a lot to unpack here, but I'll say that we're really kind of refocusing. We tried very hard to get things done at a federal level, and clearly that didn't work. Then we start looking at states, and recycling becomes one of those kind of political issues, and you can't get things passed at the state. So now we're really trying to look at cities. Let's just be very focused. Let's go to cities and see what we can do to help there. The other problem here is that we could potentially produce glass at 90% recycled content, or call it, but the quality is incredibly poor. Because we put everything in one pot and sort it, the quality is terrible. And so there's quality containers to our customers is paramount. So if we send you, a container and it has a needle in it, or ceramics or Pyrex in it, it's not going to work. And when I say needles, I do mean it. There's like crows that pick at our cullet piles when they get delivered. There's still so much organics in it. It's very difficult to clean up glass because it ends up being the waste at the end of the MRF process after they've gotten everything out that they wanted, the metal and the paper. So anyway, I'll stop. I could talk about this for a long time. We talk about new technologies and processes. These are strategic, large projects. Furnace technologies, for an example, we're looking at both hybrid and electric. It's a broad stroke average, but for the most part, our furnaces are roughly 80% natural gas, 20% electricity. Hybrid would flip it, where you're 80% electricity, 20% natural gas. Full electric is possible, but it does have some limitations in the type and the colors that you can produce, the amount that you can produce, the pull, and actually the recycled content that you can put in an electric furnace. Renewable energy, things like biofuels or biomethane and hydrogen. I'll go in a bit more detail about hydrogen because it's getting a lot of press at the moment. Raw material decarbonization. Is it possible to decarbonize incoming raw materials like soda ash? And then carbon capture seems to be something that we've talked about for a very long time, but quite difficult to implement. Ardagh has invested in hydrogen in our Sweden facility. We have bought a hydrogen electrolyzer, and a hydrogen electrolyzer takes a lot of electricity and water, splits the atom to create pure oxygen and pure hydrogen. We can use both. We can use oxygen in our furnaces and we can use the hydrogen. The problem with this is that, one, you're using more electricity, so it needs to be green. Otherwise, you're not making an improvement. You're actually not decarbonizing. The other problem with hydrogen is that you get about 30% of the energy in hydrogen as the amount of electricity that you're putting in it. It's really inefficient. And so we have not yet invested in hydrogen in the US. I should also say that hydrogen has not been implemented in a glass furnace commercially across the globe, period. They've done pilot projects, they've done it for a short period of time, but it's not well known what it's going to do. So I'm happy that we've committed. We're gonna learn about it. We're gonna install the electrolyzer. We'll download and see if it makes sense to push elsewhere, but there are a lot of other things that need to happen, especially in the US, for us to adopt something like hydrogen. And I'll take this moment to pick on our electricity grid as well. If we want to electrify our process, we really can't. The grid can't take it on. There's not enough capacity out there. And so we have to work very diligently with our utilities, with our state legislatures, with our federal legislatures to lobby and help add capacity to our plants. Otherwise, we're pretty much maxed out as it is right now. When we think about energy efficiency projects, these are all the ones we know and love. They're easy, they're compressors, they're vacuum pumps, LED lighting. It's just maintenance. It's important, but in the grand scheme of things, it really is pretty minimal. When we look at renewable energy, and as I said earlier, this is the lion's share of how we decarbonize. We are, within our strategy, we're really pushing additionality, meaning we're investing in adding solar panels, we're adding wind farms. It's adding to the system. We're not going to go out and simply just buy credits to say that we did it. We really want to invest in the system. And we're looking at both on-site, near-site, and off-site. And I flag on-site so that you can see the picture to the right. That's our Bridgeton, New Jersey facility. It looks big and beautiful, but that's still only about 10% of our total electricity. So the size of the installations that help us are really going to be these big off-site, even virtual power purchase agreements, if you're familiar with the term. And these projects take a very long time. They could take upwards of, well, I shouldn't say upwards, I'd say minimum of a year before you actually are able to put shovels in the dirt. So these take a long time to execute. And again, similarly to recycling, it's a difficult market. The states are very fragmented. The policies are very restrictive and limiting, and nothing's the same across the state. So it's quite difficult to navigate this as a national company. Okay, product design. We get asked a lot about lightweighting, right? Take glass out, make it lighter, make it cheaper. We like to say right weighting. We do believe there is a place for taking glass out and lightweighting, but there is a moment where you've taken it too far and it doesn't run well at our plant or your plant. And so we really talk about right weighting. Now I say this doesn't help Ardagh, and the reason is if we take weight out of a container, we're actually going to end up speeding up our process, meaning we're going to melt the same amount of glass regardless. We're just going to get more containers out of that glass. So we're going to continue to emit the same amounts, but the impact to the customer is where it's felt, because that one container is lighter and it's got less carbon in it. I hope that makes sense. And another broad stroke here, and this is average across the plant. This differs on what kind of container we're manufacturing, whether it's wine or beer. But if we can take 1,000 tons of glass out of your portfolio, you're going to save about 800 tons of CO2, if not more on certain containers. And then lastly, on low carbon transport. So if you look at scope 1 and 2, this is kind of direct and indirect emissions from on-site. So as we convert forklifts and heavy machinery, say from liquid propane to electricity, that's a way that we can decarbonize. There's also a health and safety component. If you've seen folks that are, changing cylinders or refilling cylinders, these are the projects sustainability folks really like, because we can then go to senior leaders and say, this isn't just for sustainability, I'm actually making your plant safer, or I'm saving your plant some money. And then on scope 3, that's our upstream and downstream transport. We're partnering with the EPA on their Smart Way program, or working with our warehouses or decorators on partnerships. How can we work together to decarbonize our and your process together so that the end customer is really getting the full benefit? So it's nice that Ardagh Glass Packaging says we're doing all these things, and they're very ambitious. I'll be the first to tell you that. We will struggle to hit all of those targets. But I can sit here and speak and tell you about all the lovely things that we're doing, but we really need to make sure that we're getting third-party verification. So these are some of the entities or certifications and assessments that we take part in that help us better communicate to you and to our customers that what we're saying, we're actually doing it, we're really living it. But also that greenwashing is becoming really scrutinized. And it's important that what we share is valid, it's real, it's verified, the data is there, because it's the last thing that we want to do is become a greenwashing company that then impacts all of our customers, big and small. And then I said at the very beginning, I'll leave you with a kind of a nice, unrelated to decarbonization story, but I am very, very proud of Ardagh Glass, or Ardagh Group, in their investment in education. So we partner with a program called Project Lead the Way in the US, committed $10 million over the next 10 years in STEM education in and around the facilities where we operate. As you likely know, investment into our public education system is very small, it's poor. And so what we're doing is helping to get some technology and programming in place in and around our communities. And I've been very fortunate to visit some of these schools to see the impact of those programs. And it's pretty impressive, humbling, when you see them building robots and you're like, damn, you're smarter me now than I've ever been. But it's really lovely. I'm so excited that we've done it. And it's been so successful that we're rolling it out to Brazil, Germany, Africa, and so there's a lot more coming. So I think that was it from me. I feel like I may have rushed through that, I apologize, but any questions, comments?
Questions for Alex?
Yeah.
What country do you feel is doing the best with their recyclable programs right now with glass and the percentage of cullet that is used?
Yeah, good question. The UK and Germany, I would say Sweden. Basically, just about anybody in Europe's doing a great job. You go to Germany and you're on the street, and it's not just a recycling bin. It's a recycling bin for aluminum and paper, and then it's a recycling for brown glass, clear glass, green glass, blue glass, and they do it. And they do it, right? So I would say Germany is really high up there.
And the percentage of glass cullet used?
Yeah, that's another good question. So we have seen upwards of 90%, primarily in colors like amber and green. We can get up to 60% or so with flint, but you think about our end customer, they're usually high-end spirits companies. When you add that much cullet, you start to get a little color contamination. And so 60% kind of seems to be the limit, then because the glass isn't as clear and as premium as they would like it to be.
And any thoughts to building glass factories by hydroelectric dams and using electricity for furnaces?
Yeah. I'll be very frank. We are an antiquated industry. We are underinvested for a very long time. So also, the glass industry has been in decline for a very long time. You talk to folks that are in their 20s, they almost don't even know what glass packaging is. Everything's in aluminum and plastic. Point being, there really hasn't been a need to build a new plant because the infrastructure and the capacity is already there. Sorry, that was kind of a bummer response.
Well, some of your factories are getting pretty old.
They are.
I've been to the Seattle one, and I know that's getting pretty old.
Yes, it is. You're right. And I will say that we have some new leadership within our North American business. And we are taking a very hard look at how we turn this business around and what that looks like. Because we have been underinvested for so long, is this the right time to maybe rebuild? So it's a good question, and I think we're looking at it, but it wouldn't be about adding capacity. It would be about building better, if that makes sense.
So do you think there's a lot of difference between glass manufacturing in North America versus Europe?
In terms of the technologies?
In terms of technologies and...
Not really. We kind of like three different technologies. I'll likely start pushing the boundaries of my actual expertise of glass making. But you have regenerative furnaces, recuperative furnaces, and you have oxy-fueled furnaces. We're starting to see the like hybrid furnaces and the electric furnaces come on board. But for the most part, Europe is really doing regen and recuperative. And in the US, we're doing oxy. It's not that much different. It's really just how you're managing your waste heat. And in particular, in the US, the one thing that we do better than our European counterparts is that our NOx emissions are lower because we have more oxy-fueled furnaces. We're not using ambient, nitrogen-rich air to combust. So maybe a long-winded answer, but they're not that much different, no.
And the recycling plants which we have in North America, are they more private sector or more
Yes.
publicly funded? Or
Private sector, yes. And I like talking about this because we have one kind of primary player. And if you think about it, and I didn't paint a very good picture earlier, but when you recycle, all that goes to a MRF, or a materials recovery facility, right? And they're going to take out the aluminum, they take out the metal, take out the paper, and at the end is basically waste. And it either is going to go to their landfill, or someone is going to buy it or potentially get it for nothing. And that's what they process. So they get waste in feed material that they then try to kick the glass out of. But yes, it is largely private, and I'll stop there.
You said glass is in decline. Do you have a percentage or an idea on what that is?
I've got one number that one of our larger beer customers, we were losing about 50,000 tons a year with them of glass, converting that either to aluminum can or an aluminum bottle. And what's interesting too is that this is the first year, I think, in I don't know how many decades, that wine consumption has dropped.
because tequila consumption has gone up.
And you got a lot more alcohol in that little bit of tequila than your glass of wine, don't you? We are seeing a lot of spirits, and that's good because spirits isn't a heavy bottle, right? But different processes. We're not that flexible. If you stop making, if beer goes down and you need to replace it with spirits, you have to change your process. It's not the same machine. But yes, hopefully that helps.